Well, welcome. Thank you for spending your lunch hour with us. My name is Alex Dupy. I'm with MIG. We are the consultant firm that was hired by the city to look at downtown and the Meridian corridor in terms of street improvements and different types of elements that, might over time help improve different elements of the downtown from both a pedestrian, safety, transit and vehicle component. We're really excited to have you here. We want to get into questions as soon as possible, and we have a great group of folks here. So as we do that, Nathan, do you want to go ahead and share screen, and then we'll do some quick introductions and step right into it. All right. So with that, before we jump into it and before we get quick introductions, I want to, for folks who have not done a Zoom meeting or a Zoom virtual tour, I just want to talk about some of the features that we have within Zoom. We have a nice group of folks that we can probably raise hands. We can also speak, but I want to show you the different ways that you can get involved with this specific project as well as this meeting. So when you came on, you were all muted. And the reason why we do that is because we have a number of folks, and just like a regular open house, we want to make sure that everybody has a voice and has time to speak. And so we use that mute function just to make sure that we can manage the conversation, but also to make sure that everybody has has time and an opportunity to provide input. There's a couple different things we're going to do, and this slide shows some different ways that you can provide input and you can be a part of this process. We have a chat feature, which is right down at the bottom, and you'll see it's a little icon, and actually Sue sent you a little note when you were in the waiting room. As we're stepping through the presentation, or you have questions as we're in a conversation, feel free to use that chat for anything that comes up that you might want to bring in the conversation. There'll be a number of folks who will be monitoring the chat, and so as you provide questions or you have other comments, we'll bring that into the conversation to make sure that those are covered as best we can as we move forward. There's also a raise hand feature that's under the reactions right at the bottom, and you'll see what you can do with a few different things there. One, you can raise your hand, just puts a little yellow or hand feature right at the top. And what that does is that brings you right up to the top of the queue in terms of the participants. And so that way we know you have a question or you want to provide input. So as again with the chat feature, feel free to raise your hand if you have a question or you have a comment, something you want to talk about. And as those come up, we'll make sure that we can get you into the conversation. We're really excited to have this conversation with you, and so we hope that with the number of folks we have, this can be very open, and so that we can just have talk about what you like and what are issues about downtown and Meridian corridor, but also in the long run, what types of projects we might want to think about over in the coming years. So with that, and also thank you, Nathan. One other piece, if you are hard of hearing or have are not able to follow along with the presentation, you can also add closed captioning. And so what that will do is that'll provide captioning at the bottom of the screen so that you can follow along. So if you have any questions as we step through this, not just about the project or the process, or if you want to make sure your question is brought forward, feel free to use any of those things. And you feel free as we step through this to stop us, and we can definitely help step through that. So with that, I want to turn it over to Scott Tash, who's the city's project manager, who's going to provide some quick introductions, and then we'll step into the project. Scott, do you want to kick us off?
Absolutely, thank you. Again, my name is Scott Koch. I'm the project manager, and just a quick housekeeping thing, Alex, we have 2 arts commissioners that just called me and said they're not able to get into the meeting. So I don't know if there's anything you can do on your end to help facilitate that, but I'm just passing that along. The city is working to identify ways to enhance the public amenities and the character of the downtown area. And these would be things like public benches, garbage receptacles, public art, street lighting, flower boxes, and hanging planter baskets. In conjunction with that, we're also looking at the functionality of multimodal transportation. So that's bicycles, buses, and pedestrian traffic. And finally, this project has evaluated the possible downtown trees and vegetation augmentations that we can do to provide less conflict with infrastructure, sidewalks specifically, and overhead utilities. Additionally, the city is reviewing city-owned and operated water, sewer, and drainage utility infrastructure, as well as private utility infrastructure, gas, power, and cable for possible replacements due to conflicts and capacity enhancements. As previously stated, the city has hired a consultant, MIG, to develop and prioritize a list of recommendations to improve streetscapes in the downtown area. The city is now seeking input from residents, which will be taken into consideration for the development and prioritization of street amenities and infrastructure improvements. So in short, the hope is that we'll actually be able to develop some hardcore engineering projects that we would actually design and go out and build in this area. In terms of introductions from MIG, we have Nathan Polanski, Sue Gardner, Claudia Sackett, Hunam, Alex Dupuy, and Justin Martin. And on the city side, we have Eric Johnson, our PIO, Public Information Officer, Meredith Neal, our Economic Development Director, and myself, Scott Koch, Project Manager. So MIG will now conduct a brief PowerPoint presentation detailing the various aspects of the projects and of the project, and then after that, we will take questions from the public. So I'll, at this point, turn it back over to MIG.
And Nathan, before you do that, Scott, I just sent you an invite for those two Arts Commission members. If you can send that to them, that should bring them into the meeting.
Yeah, I'll see what I can do. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you guys. So I'm Nathan Polanski. I'm a civil engineer with MIG and the kind of team's project manager. What we're going to do is just do a quick overview of the schedule and kind of what we've done so far, and then we'll hop into our discussion. So as Scott mentioned, what we're really focused on is helping the city identify opportunities to invest in infrastructure and streetscape enhancements downtown and along Meridian that both spur development and improve the kind of overall kind of look, feel, and experience, and really focused on how this can be done kind of to align with existing planning work that the city's done. The outcome of our project is identifying and recommending a set of projects or programs for future work. And so the kind of process that we're stepping through, we've gone through and done a lot of data gathering over the last 5 months. We have a kind of fairly robust outreach process that this meeting is part of. Coming from that information, we're going to identify a set of preliminary recommendations. We're working with a technical advisory committee that includes a kind of variety of city staff members that will help us evaluate and prioritize those recommendations. And then we'll come back out to the public to kind of talk about those preliminary recommendations before developing kind of a final set that would be taken to City Council at the end of our project. From the study area scope or study area, we're looking at Meridian from Grayland Park at 5th Avenue Northwest, all the way through the downtown core, through the fairgrounds, down to SR 512, and just to the south off the screen is 14th. So we're looking at the Meridian corridor, as well as the downtown core from Stewart down to Pioneer. The boundaries generally are sort of kind of, 3rd west to 3rd east. And there's kind of a sort of soft boundaries to some extent. From a schedule standpoint, we got started in November, and so we're kind of a handful of months into this. Or I guess we didn't get started. We got started earlier than November, but this kind of shows kind of where we're at right now. From a community engagement standpoint, we've met with a series of focus groups or stakeholder meetings, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. We're preparing for a second meeting with the technical advisory committee in kind of late February. We're at our first public meeting, and we're hoping to come back to the kind of broader public in June with the kind of preliminary recommendations. And then there's also kind of 3 touch points with City Council throughout the process, the first of which we are looking to schedule for the first week of March. So what work have we done so far? We've done a very kind of comprehensive review of existing city documents, kind of planning documents, as well as some of the technical documents. We've met with a variety of city staff out in the field on site. And so we've walked the project area with public works staff and engineering staff to look at kind of pavement conditions, utility conditions, talk about kind of constraints and issues for people walking, driving, and biking through the project area. We've done sort of an informal kind of high level audit of the streetscape environment, kind of to understand the character and kind of types of furnishings and planting areas that are present. An arborist has done a high level review of the existing trees, and we've done sort of a study of the kind of rail crossings and opportunities for future opportunities for potentially, lessening the noise as trains move through the corridor. Some of the key themes from kind of that data gathering, there's really a desire to improve the walkability of downtown, encourage kind of multimodal transportation, people walking, biking, taking the bus, arriving on the train, providing high quality public space and attractive streets. Really recognizing that the streets downtown should cater to kind of people walking. Businesses are really not focused on kind of vehicle centric uses, but kind of really people, walking and parking. Looking for opportunities to provide infrastructure that encourages growth. We're working with city planning staff to explore opportunities to remove obstacles and concerns for development. What are utility needs, kind of infrastructure below ground, as well as kind of traffic safety, train noise, and then aligning kind of the downtown street standards with kind of planning goals. I mentioned this series of stakeholder meetings, and so these are the kind of 7 focus groups that we've met with so far. The Main Street Association, a group of business and property owners from the project area. We had an in-person session at the Senior Center. We met with folks from the development community, kind of a walking and biking focus group, the Chamber of Commerce, and folks from the fairgrounds. And key takeaways from that meeting, or downtown hosts a lot of events, but the sidewalks aren't particularly pedestrian friendly. There's a desire for improved curb appeal of the downtown streets. We heard a lot about parking. It can be hard to find. People don't know where the off-street parking is. The on-street parking has various time restrictions that can be limiting. We talked about wayfinding or directional signage and how that can improve people's experience and ability to get around downtown. We talked about traffic on Meridian, and how to slow traffic down, are there opportunities to kind of improve east-west traffic. In the kind of pedestrian realm, kind of providing opportunities for more people to stop and rest, and how those areas can lead to development and improve the kind of downtown feel. There were some thoughts that, Stewart Avenue north of the tracks feels a little bit disconnected from downtown. So we're going to be kind of looking more about, for opportunities to provide more cohesiveness and not have the tracks be as much of a barrier. Lighting and visibility concerns, particularly in some of the alleys where people access businesses. And there are a couple in the project area, and there are very few or limited kind of opportunities for people biking. So with that, what we'd like to do is just kind of stop and pause for a moment and see if there are any questions from anyone in attendance.
Well, and actually, I'd like to, Tim, you kicked us off in the chat, and I want to kind of dig into some of your questions or comments that you had in there. I think the idea that you're bringing up to the foreground is, making this area very pedestrian friendly and not really a thoroughfare. If I'm summarizing what you put in your chat correctly, but really kind of creating a place that's more walkable, that's more exciting, that gets people to stop. Am I characterizing that correctly, or do you want to expand on that for the rest of the group? And others, feel free to drop in the chat too if you have additional comments or questions for the stuff that either Tim says or Nathan covered.
Oh yeah. Oh yes. Hi. Sorry, I had to disconnect from my. Do you guys hear me now?
We can. Thank you.
Oh great. Yeah. Thanks. Yeah. When it's connected, my external monitors, people can't hear, and I can turn on my video. Yes. Yeah. I mean, all you have to do is look at the famous Strong Towns video, Conversations with a Traffic Engineer. It is my all-time favorite transportation related video. It's anyone working on transportation issues, especially from the engineering standpoint, definitely needs to see it. Meridian needs to be a true place, and I'm just so tired of these couplets like the Watson Hall couplet in Beaverton, the Broadway Wilder couplet in Northeast Portland. That should be the most vibrant place in all of Portland, at least from a neighborhood commercial district standpoint. But it's just a freeway. And the Broadway Neighborhood Association, Businesses for Better Broadway was actually formed back in the 50s to oppose the freewayification of Broadway and Wilder. And now they exist to oppose putting it on a road diet, or I don't like to call them a road diet anymore. I like to call them a street buffet, so that there's something for everyone, because people hate things being removed from them. You're taking away my parking. You're taking away my my driving lanes. I want to drive 70 miles per hour out to, some place 30 miles distant, so call it a street buffet. And that's what Meridian definitely could have. And there's no mention of encouraging people to arrive by train. I mean, imagine taking the Sounder, get up early in the morning in Tacoma and just take the train out there and have fun, go to Pink Chandelier and all these like cool stores and, Meeker, just there's so many neat little things in Puyallup and Sumner both, and you can have a whole fun day of it and then just take the commuter train right back, and the Foothills Trail and these other, amazing trails that go so far out. Puyallup is right at the center of all that. And it's never emphasized. There are so many non-car ways to enjoy downtown Puyallup that no one in Tacoma knows. I have never talked to anyone in Tacoma who's ever known any of this stuff.
Well, Tim, that's great. So if I can summarize, essentially, thinking more broadly than, for the Meridian corridor than just vehicle throughput. If we're using those connections both from bicycle, pedestrian, transit, train, whatever that is, and kind of thinking a little bit more than just being able to get through as quickly and efficiently as possible. That's really similar to what we heard from a number of the initial stakeholder meetings. And so thank you for bringing that in, and actually great examples if folks have been to Beaverton or Portland or other places. Managing your streets for all users, not just vehicles.
Downtown Salem, another example. Commercial liberty kills downtown Salem. The more we make it car friendly, the worse it is for business. It's a complete inverse proportionality.
Great, thank you, Tim.
Alex and Tim, actually, I remembered one housekeeping thing that we were asked from city staff is, as you kind of join and chat and kind of join via audio, if you could let us know kind of what neighborhood you live in the city.
Thank you, Nathan.
One of the things that city council likes to know is whether, we're hearing from residents or people outside of the city. And so if you could provide that just to kind of let us know, that'd be great.
All right. Another comment, Olivia, you had a question about is decoupling the couplet being considered? And my understanding, and Scott, Nathan, correct me if I'm wrong, is we're not doing traffic analysis for this project. This is primarily about pedestrian and street improvements as opposed to looking at changing the flow. But Tim, to your point, making it more pedestrian friendly throughout both downtown and along the corridor. Is that fair, both Nathan and Scott?
Yeah, that's an accurate statement.
Great, thank you. So other questions, and I want to make sure we honor what the stuff that Nathan and others have told us. I also want to make sure that we can get into, we want to do some fun polling. We actually want to get into kind of an old school map technique that we used to do when we met in person 3 years ago. So I do want to make sure we can save time for that. Other questions or comments from the information that Nathan presented?
People calling me that can't get in. What do I tell them?
I can send an invite. They should, you should just be able to go through the registration and come right in, but let me send you an invite. Give me just a moment, everybody.
I'm in now. Can you hear me?
Kathy's in now.
But Sophia's not in. The only thing that works is just pushing the join meeting. Doing the Zoom number or the call in, none of those worked. It just kept saying waiting for host. So if you tell her to push the join meeting on the link,
yes,
it should work.
That's correct. And here's what I'll do is I will send, just in case others call you, I just sent a link to everybody that there's a link that you just click that and you can come right in if people are having problems. But yeah, just hit the join meeting button if you're at the space. All right, any other questions about the
Kathy's on.
I missed the presentation, so
Well, there's Kathy, there's plenty of opportunity. We're actually more here to hear your input rather than just the presentation. So give us just a second and we'll get going on that.
can,
The other
So
piece to
pres-
this,
go ahead.
the other piece for this, and Sue just dropped it in the chat. And as we step through some of the polling that we'll be doing and also some of the questions, I want to make sure that you know that we do have an online survey also available. So it'll be covering, a number of very similar questions that we're asking during this open house. I do encourage you to take the survey because the survey does go into more depth, and it's actually kind of fun because you can use a series of maps to drop pins on specific areas and answer questions. You can do it on a computer, a tablet, or a phone. So it's very flexible in the format that you use. And if you do have questions or you need additional assistance, the city is happy to help with that. So as you're stepping through this and we're answering these questions, make sure you also take the survey if you can after this, and we'll continue to put it in the chat. So with that, any other questions with what Nathan presented? And Kathy, I know that you weren't able to see the presentation, but we'll get back into a lot of what we heard as we step into some of the other questions. All right, so with that, let's move on. All right, so we are going to do just a little bit of polling in this. And so if you haven't done polling before, it's just like when you take a survey, except we're going to do it on screen and we're going to share results immediately with you. And the focus of this polling is really just to, kind of get kind of the creative juices flowing as we start thinking about this. And then we want to take this into a map exercise moving forward. So give me just a second. I'm going to share a poll. And this is just a quick icebreaker poll. So with this question, what are your favorite things to do at the state fair? And you can answer as many of these as you want. You can answer 1 or 3 or 5. As you're stepping through it, just click through which things you like to do or which things, if you don't want to answer every one of them, that's fine. But give us a little sense of what you like to do at the fair. All right, going through it. All right, we got just a couple more people, a couple more answering there. We'll give me about another 10 seconds or so. All right, last options. Here we go. I'm going to shut it down. All right, so what we'll do is we're going to ask a couple other questions after this, but I just want to share the results of what people like to do. Some people like to eat a 3-foot corn dog. You pay for that afterwards. You pay for that afterwards, but it's something you can always do at the fair. Other folks ride a roller coaster or just walking around to see the sights. The reason, this question is, just to warm us up a little bit, but we like to do polling for a variety of reasons. One is to get a sense of, where you're at and what you're coming to in terms of history and experience as a part of this project, but also it's fun to see where people, what people are thinking as we step through this. So we're going to ask 2 more questions, and then we're going to step into a different exercise. So let me stop sharing. All right. So the next question, what do you think are some of the biggest issues facing downtown?
What you can do, then we'll fix it.
What do you think are some of the biggest issues facing downtown today? Sidewalk obstructions, which could be routes. It could be, as you're seeing, patches within the sidewalk, traffic jams after trains, unsafe crosswalks, wait time at traffic signals, inadequate bike amenities, not enough bus stops or shelters. Those are some of the options. So let me launch our poll real quick. And I'm going to slide this over, and you can move this around on your screen too. So go ahead and tell us, what are the top 3 for say that you think are the biggest issues facing downtown today? And there's also an other feature or other answer at the bottom too, which we'll dig into if none of these fit the issues that you think are facing downtown or the Meridian corridor. All right, some responses coming in. There we go. All right, we're going to go about another 15 seconds or so. All right. A few more people are voting. Okay. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and end the poll. Share the results. All right. So one big winner here, if you will, sidewalk obstructions. The majority of folks voted for sidewalk obstructions as one of the biggest issues facing downtown, but two others came up as equal, and one is unsafe crosswalks and wait time at traffic signals. So those are also other things that came up. So for people who voted for sidewalk obstructions, what are some of the reasons or things that you noted? And actually, we could, if you voted for unsafe crosswalks or others as well too, go ahead and raise your hand or just drop in the chat about why you voted for the way you did. I'll stop sharing here. You don't have to share if you don't want to. You can. All right. We had one person vote for other. For that, uneven sidewalks. Thank you, David. So uneven because of roots or because of patching? Is that kind of what you're getting at there? And Nathan, you had a question, patching and cracking. Thank you, David. Nathan, you had a follow-up question. For people that selected wait times at traffic signals, is this for people walking or driving?
And kind of the reason I asked is, one of the things we've observed on our site visits is that you have to push the pedestrian push button at the traffic signal to be able to get the call signal to cross Meridian, even if it's a green light sometimes.
And what about the vote for other? What did we miss? What are some other things we should consider as an issue in downtown? If you're willing to share what that is. Walking. Just walking and as feeling safe. Paige, is that what you're?
I was talking about the wait time at the crosswalks.
Oh, I see. Thank you.
The traffic light. Sorry, it took me a minute to.
No, that's great. Thank you. Yeah, we heard from both drivers as well as pedestrians that those east-west wait times can be challenging along Meridian.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, we'll come back to this. So we're gonna step into the next one. Nathan, want to go to the next slide? So those are the issues. And you remember a key goal for this project is to identify a series of potential projects over time that could be programmed to help address some of those issues. So in what ways can downtown be improved? And so let's launch a poll, actually step through this. First, more seating. We heard that was important for many people. Consistent branding and signage, being able to find out where you are and how you get to certain places. Planting strips with native plants. Traffic calming, kind of to Tim Davis's comment earlier. More parklets, and parklets for what people don't know about that's essentially taking a parking space in front of a business and using it for seating or some other uses. And the city of Puyallup has done a lot of that. And actually there's an example of one of those there for COVID. So it essentially extends the business out into the street. And then bike lanes. All right, so let me launch the poll. All right, here we go. All right. So what do you think? What ways do you think downtown can be improved? And pick up to 3 or so, not limited to that, but maybe try and focus on that. Votes are coming in. I see a favorite here. They're all right. I believe we have just a couple more people who have been voting. All right, well, one more, maybe just another 5 seconds, 5-10 seconds. Get that last one in. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and end the poll. Share the results. Well, so there's a clear kind of priority with this, ways to improve downtown and traffic calming by far was a majority for our poll within this meeting. But others too, bike lanes, consistent branding and signage also ranked very highly with this group here. And I think, again, that goes to some of the other questions about east-west connectivity for timing for walking, pedestrian environment for along sidewalks, but also making people feel safe if they're out. And traffic calming is primarily for for bikes and peds. There were a few folks who voted for more parklets, expanding that kind of business and experience environment downtown. And then one person voted for more seating. But also, bike lanes as well too came up very high. That's something that we heard from the bicycle and pedestrian community, but also others who wanted more access to those regional trails and some of those other locations to be able to have safe connections through downtown and along Meridian. And so it was both downtown focused, but also more broadly focused. Tim, you had a comment. A bike lane does not mean mere paint. The standard today is protected bike lane, completely separated from cars, and yay for traffic calming. And parklets are wonderful. So Tim, I think if people are in agreement, just a description, what Tim is talking about for protected bike lanes is in some fashion, the bike lane is protected either by a median, a curb, bollards, something like that, that provides that type of protection in addition to just paint like you would see in a traditional bike lane. All right, great information. Okay. So as we step into the next piece, just a quick plug again for our survey. We'll put this again in the chat so you can just click on that. But let's step into the next piece. So Claudia, I'm gonna have you share your screen. As she's doing that, those results, did that surprise anybody? And feel free just to raise your hand if you want to comment in the meeting, or you can also do it in the chat. Any of that surprise you? All right. So we're going to switch gears just for a little bit. And this program, this is called Mural. And do you remember, like when we used to meet together, we'd meet around maps and we'd put sticky notes and we'd draw arrows and we'd look at different things. So this tool allows us to do that. So as we start to think about issues and opportunities, which we talked a little bit about in the polling, you're going to see a lot of cursors floating around within the poll. As we're talking and bringing in the chat, we're going to add pieces to this map. We're going to add information. You can see Nathan floating around there. And so what we would like to do is actually fill up sticky notes, and we'd like to identify core locations or key areas that we should really focus on. So with this, we're going to focus on downtown primarily. In this first slide, we'll get to the Meridian corridor south of here in just a little bit. But thinking about what we heard in the polling, better bicycle and pedestrian connectivity, traffic calming, other kind of issues and opportunities downtown, are there key locations or areas that we should start to think about those things? And feel free, raise your hand. We can bring it in. There's a handful of us, so if you want to talk, feel free to unmute yourself and do that, or drop it in the chat, and we'll bring it into the chat as well. Tim, you had a comment. A 6-year-old can bike pretty safely through much of downtown Vancouver, BC. Doesn't even include the world-class seaside greenway. Excuse me. Puyallup has tons of potential. So, Tim, where would you focus if you were to look at bike lanes or opportunities for those better bike ped connections? Where would you want to focus?
Pretty much right in the core. Too often people going through a city by bike are encouraged, well, just take the greenways, don't take the main commercial district. There's a greenway over there like 3 blocks away, but there are 0 businesses along that neighborhood greenway. It's wonderful, and I love biking on greenways. If I don't have a specific destination, or even if I do, that's a few miles or whatever, but they should be encouraged to go right down the heart of Meridian. And if that requires removing a bunch of car parking, great. There is so much parking throughout the entire city. It's just incredible. Everyone seems to complain about lack of parking. It's everywhere. Like if you're at the top floor of the Hotel Murano in downtown Tacoma and look down, all you see is empty parking lots everywhere. And yet everyone seems to be like, God, there's no parking to be found. What? And that's partly because a lot of it is privatized. You know, some dead bank branch, you know, they have you can only be a customer at this bank, you know, in order to park here. And so we've got to completely change that in all of that, you know, how parking is allocated. There is way more than enough parking, but everyone wants to park 5 feet from the entrance to the store that they're going to. And that's just ridiculous. And it doesn't promote any walking or biking. And it certainly doesn't promote any business activity, you know, because there's just cars constantly in the way there. So I say put protected biking right down the heart of Meridian.
Great, thank you, Tim. What do others think about? What do others think about either that or, you know, other issues or opportunities in downtown? And maybe more specifically, we heard a lot about crossings, you know, crossing times. Are there specific intersections that we should be looking at in terms of safe crossing or other elements that would make bike ped access safer or more efficient in downtown?
I think a lot of the things could be solved a little bit with the traffic issues if our lights were synchronized again. I know they try real hard to synchronize them, but that doesn't happen. And I agree with the gentleman who spoke a moment ago about parking. One of the problems we have is our own business people wanting to park right in front of their businesses. And that happens too often. And I think we have seen that with the little areas where the restaurants have, that those parking spaces have gone away, that hasn't really caused, in my opinion, that many problems. I'm a walker. I walk downtown sometimes 5 times a day. I guess I have a lot of concerns about this project and the investments and the thoughts without cleaning up our downtown streets first. I think, and I know I missed the first part, and maybe those were the kind of things that were discussed, but.
Also, Kathy, let's break that part a little bit. So what I heard, synchronized lights is one.
Huge.
So that's a big one. Parking and how it's allocated. You know, as a walker, I believe that was another issue. But let's talk about when you were saying cleaning up downtown streets. What does that mean to you?
What it means to me is that I can walk downtown and not have to step over debris or drugs or drug paraphernalia, excuse me. Graffiti. We have boarded up buildings right now, empty buildings that, you know, I sometimes think we think about this as economic development, and I'd like to think that's true, but always you shouldn't build it and they will come. Sometimes you have to solve the problem first. Mm-hmm. and then enhance. You know, right now, back when I was in office, we had a company called Vadis that came, I think, at least once a month. It might have been every other week, that actually cleaned up the city streets, and they quit that project about 5 years ago, I believe. And I wonder why, and I wonder why not put it back.
Great, thank you, Kathy. I appreciate that. David, you had a comment in the chat that you live at Pioneer Park and love being able to get to nearby businesses, but the sidewalks and crossings can be a challenge. Does that get to, David? Does that get to, you know, kind of either tree roots or kind of patching that makes it uneven? Is that what you're talking about, or is it something else that we should identify? Patching and disrepair, thank you. And just as a I forgot to mention this in the beginning. We will be saving all of these chats as well too. So everything that happens on Mural is saved, and also the chat, we export that. So that all becomes part of the project. So however you are comfortable providing input, whether it's in, you know, in person, by voice, on the Mural, or in the chat, we're saving all of this information. It goes into the project to help us, you know, essentially get to the next phase where we start to think about projects. All right, other pieces. I'm curious. We've talked a little bit about parking. We've talked about bicycles and pedestrians. What about the transit station? What about who, you know, if you take transit, what's good and bad about that environment around it from a pedestrian or bike standpoint? If you don't take transit, is there a reason why you wouldn't? Like, is there something there that would stop you from doing that? Other than that it goes to Tacoma or Seattle. All right, so I'm going to add to that question. The train tracks essentially, you know, cut across downtown. And what we heard from businesses to the north along Stewart and other locations is that, you know, those train tracks really are both a physical and visual barrier to between kind of the north and the south sides of downtown. What do you think are ways that we could improve that? Do you think that there are ways that we could, you know, make that more inviting to be able to cross, or to be able to, you know, really connect the north and the south parts of downtown? Is that signage? Is it lighting? Is it pedestrian improvements?
Or the way that, you know, some of the specialty kind of sidewalk pavement is done with kind of the daffodils and the crosswalks, or those types of features, things that could be brought to Stewart to make it feel more cohesive.
We're asking you to put your planner and designer hat on for this. So
I think it's difficult. I think it's difficult to talk about making it easier to go over the tracks when the tracks are as dangerous as they are. I think that one of the things I understand that the council is looking at is the type of sound that they have down at Point Ruston on making it less noisy, especially in the middle of the night, which will certainly be advantageous to people who live near the tracks.
So Kathy, is that a quiet zone or something like
yes,
that? Okay.
Thank you. Yeah. Instead of the guy who, you know, the old rumor that he's upset and at 2:30 a.m. he slams on the horn all the way through town. And that seems to happen.
Yeah.
But as far as making it easier to walk across the tracks, I don't really know. You know, we have art downtown. Maybe we could put art closer to the tracks too. I think art's a real important thing as we look at this project. But the closer we get to the tracks, and where sometimes that's a lot of the vagrancy issues, then that comes with graffiti and damage and all of those things too.
You know, when we were walking through downtown Puyallup, first thing I noticed is that you have a great art program. You have pieces of art throughout, QR codes, you know, that can explain and take that. So Kathy, do you think when you talk about art, is that expanding the current art program, or is that looking at different ways to provide art downtown?
Well, understand that the arts program, you have two of us here. Paige is the president of Arts Downtown. I'm the membership chair. That's a nonprofit organization. So we're the ones who bring the arts to the city and then try to purchase many pieces. And we've purchased over 50 and donate it to the city. So that's one of the concerns, or one of the questions and reasons we want to be so involved, and we appreciate Scott making us a stakeholder. But, you know, as you do make these changes, that art is permanent. So we want to know what that means on, you know, moving, cleaning, vandalism, because we are responsible. The nonprofit is responsible for the maintenance of all of that art. Do we want to expand it? You bet. Mm-hmm. Can we get it across the tracks? We would like to. We've kind of limited our areas a little bit closer, more to the core, and a lot of that is because of vandalism. I say that word too much. I'd like to take that out of my vocabulary. Help us do that.
Thank you, Kathy. Sue, you had a question. You actually posed a question to the group, and I want to come back to that. So we have this north-south bifurcation with the tracks, and there's trains that go through this area. That's not going to stop. But what are there things you'd like to see at the intersections? I heard Kathy, a quiet zone. Are there other things we should think about for those intersections as we start thinking about what improvements might be to downtown? And Tim, you were, I think, more broadly talking about, better bike connections, whether that's, I would assume that would use those intersections in some fashion for the kind of north-south linkages.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and if we get more people out of their cars and out walking, biking, rolling, stuff like that, then it'll create more eyes on the street. And I think that would take care of Kathy's, very legitimate concerns about, some of the things that classic broken windows theory, like,
Right.
but if people are just passing through on cars, there's no sense of ownership. There's no sense of place at all,
Well, I think I'm hearing from in various ways, creating a sense of vibrancy downtown. You have great businesses and you have, a really active business environment, but, really building on that and using the street to be able to support that, whether that's, traffic calming, better amenities, but really, making sure that there's people there to watch the street. And that just means more feet walking the sidewalks and stopping at businesses and doing those types of things that make an area active. I do want to make sure we save some time for the Southern Meridian corridor. Before we switch to that, though, if you had one project you wanted to do, like in this area, where would you focus? What would you do first? If it could be one thing, where would you focus? And we don't all have to agree on that, but what would your project be?
Mine would be cleanliness. I think I've said it.
Street cleaning.
Street cleaning, and it because it makes a difference in so many different ways. We used to have more walkers downtown. The walking is slowed down, not raised, and I think some of that comes from the type of businesses that have opened. Economic development brings money, which brings cleanliness, which brings walkers. So I suppose that's a equation that includes more than one thing that you're asking for.
That's great, Catholic. So, clean up downtown. And Chuck, I saw you have your thumbs up on that. David, you talked about sidewalks. So getting back to the unevenness of sidewalks, making them safer for pedestrians.
Part of the proposal is to put in more garbage receptacles and recycling. Maybe that would help if people have a place to throw it, they do it appropriately.
Great, some more receptacles. We actually heard that they were removed at one point, and then
yes.
but they didn't come back, or didn't come back in similar locations. So having a place to dump your garbage rather than on the corner, in the planter or just on the street. Street trees. So Nathan, you had a question about street trees that you're posing to the group. Street trees are great, but they, if they're not the right selection, the roots can heave the sidewalks, and then that gets to, David and others' concerns about, safe sidewalks, throughout downtown. What about street trees? What do we need more? Do we need different ones? Do we need
or do people think more planting at the ground level would be desired instead of street trees to kind of get back to, does that get to the beautification or cleanliness or kind of appearance?
I think one of the fears is that they're going to cut down street trees. So that needs to be quelled or discussed, or I understand the need for some to go that have been taken out because of the roots. But
so replacing, if there are removal, replacing those with appropriate species. That's what I'm hearing from you, Kathy. Is that right?
Appropriate species or even some in containers. But some of the beautiful ones I'd sure hate to see removed just because.
Right, thank you. And then just, I think Tim, very appropriate comment, walking outside is COVID safe generally, considering where we've been. So having that active, attractive environment with shade and other amenities, kind of supports where we've been the past 3 years, right? Better for worse. So this is great. So I do want to move just to the southern part of downtown on Meridian, just to cover that. We can always come back to this, but I want to make sure we can cover this because I think a lot of these questions and comments are also appropriate or similar to what we're going to hear down south. So as we're doing that, Claudia, can you take us to the next page? And just as we're doing this, we are also doing a meeting exactly like this at 6 o'clock. So what we'll be doing is building on this mural that we're developing now at the 6 o'clock meeting. So what you'll see at the end tomorrow or the next day when we export this out is actually a consolidated series of information points from both meetings. So it's great that we're building this now. So let's talk about kind of this central space, City Hall, Pioneer Park. David, you live right by here. What are some of the key issues or things we should think about in this area? David, are there intersections here that you'd want to really focus on or locations that you think are important in this area for us to focus on from a pedestrian standpoint? Or other comments too? How does the park function? When we have events, does it feel like, the street around it, does it feel full? Does it feel safe if people are accessing the park or in the south as they start to get into the fair? What's the environment around that? Does it feel comfortable? Does it feel?
The park functions well. There are indeed still some homeless issues that sometimes come up, but it's been better lately. The crosswalk, I live in that area too, the other condominium project. The crosswalk in front of City Hall is broken. It's been broken for quite a while. The crosswalk down the street in front of Giorgio's is a different type of crosswalk, and it's better than nothing, but it's not seen well.
Gotcha.
Again, you've got condominiums right across the street from the grocery store. That's where I live, over 55. And you have to go backwards to go the crosswalk to get to the grocery store. So guess what those old people do? They don't use the crosswalk. And I happen to be one of those old people, so I can say that.
We won't rat you out, Kathy.
The park is the jewel of the city. But as we talk about all this and we talk about landscaping, let's talk about City Hall. We have a beautiful City Hall. Of course, I'm very proud of it, but we have landscaping that was done for a particular reason, and we had rosemary and herbs planted for the people's use, and all of the plantings were done in furrows to replicate our city's history of our agricultural history. And I bet a lot of the people here don't know that, because now we take a weed whacker to trim them, and most of them are gone. The upstairs in City Hall, we took all of the art out, the majority of the art out off the patio because it was being vandalized, and brought it down to the city street. So again, as we think of all this, we have to think about the next step. Who's going to take care of it? Who's going to keep it clean? It's really sad when you look at the landscaping of City Hall and realize the furrows are gone and the intent is gone. And
so just to paraphrase, so it's great to put all this stuff in and think about this, but we need to think about a maintenance plan.
Absolutely.
For that. Great. So I want to get back to an earlier comment, Kathy, you made, and I think others maybe might have a comment on this as well too. Safeway is a major hub. It's the grocery store in the area. And, as you step out of downtown, those crossings become a little bit more limited, to the south. So intersections are spaced further apart. Are there locations where you think crossings would be more appropriate, or where people are running across now to get to Safeway because they don't want to walk to the intersection are there opportunities to rethink this section a little bit differently than what it is today?
Well, you know, it seems like there should be, but again, I was part of getting that crosswalk in, and it went on the other corner in front of Giorgio's, the gas station. I think that was an engineering issue. That's a weird block, that Safeway block.
Mhm.
So if there is another place, there definitely should be another one, because people are going to Safeway on, you know, everything from bikes to carts to scooters to walking to elderly to kids. And no, it is awkward to turn left to go right. People don't do it.
Well, I think it kind of gets to Tim's earlier comment about just, you know, traffic calming throughout. I mean, we were talking about downtown earlier, but, you know, it really comes down to this as a corridor, making it safer for bikes and peds to cross, you know, throughout this area. Other questions, comments, concerns, key projects, like if you could do a project in this area. I'm hearing working on the signal, or working on the pedestrian crossings. Are there other considerations we should think about in this area?
I'd like to see, go ahead, Paige, excuse me.
Sorry, I was going to say I'd like to see something done about the homeless. I mean, you can get across the street, but then you walk through the parking lot and down the front sidewalk to get to Safeway, and you're stepping over people.
Yep.
Thank you, Paige.
The garbage and that kind of thing.
Thank you, Paige. All right. And Kathy, Paige, and others, we've had really good input from you. Are there others here on the call that we haven't heard from that you'd like to provide some input or talk through? And it doesn't have to be just this section, but, you know, as we step through, want to make sure you have a space as well. So Lance or Tyler or Olivia, others, feel free, you know, use the chat. Chuck, you had your hand up. Thank you. Oh, you're on mute. Oh, still on mute, Chuck. See if I can unmute you. Oh, I can just ask to unmute. So Chuck, we'll get you back into the call. So if you can figure out to unmute, that would we want to bring you in for a comment. If you're not able to do it, drop it in the chat and we'll bring it in for you if you need assistance doing that.
Here we go.
Oh, there you go. Thank you, Chuck.
First of all, I live about 2 blocks out of the city limits. Am I allowed to say something?
Yes, you are.
Okay. I think you had an open comment for a project that might interest me. And actually, it's just next to the post office. There seems to be a kind of an open space there for about 3 or 4 years where maybe Fat Zach's was going to be put there. And I'm not sure of the details of what happened, but it's kind of an eyesore right in the center of town.
So something in that space next to the post office.
Yes.
Great. Thank you. All right, Lance, appreciate that. Just here to listen. Excited about these ideas. Thank you for coming. All right, so let's see. Tim, you had a comment. Dense new housing, such as the mixed-use development at 330 3rd Street. Definitely more housing. We heard a lot about that. Different types of housing within downtown. Number of stakeholders have talked about that. Also concerns about parking and how that's supplied. But we have heard, positivity about more and different types of housing within downtown. So thank you for that comment. Let's jump through, and we can always come back to this. Let's jump through to the southern part to make sure that we can cover any issues in the fairgrounds. And Chuck, did you still have a question or a comment? Okay.
No, thank you.
All right. Thank you. All right. So let's drop down. All right, so as we're stepping through, we're going south of the State Fair, the primary entrance, the parking lot, the grandstand. As we kind of step through, we can come through these areas. I guess 2 questions for this. Are we dealing with similar issues as what we were within downtown? Are there specific issues that, this area is unique from other places, you know, in terms of pedestrian accessibility, or not just when the fair is happening, but just in general? You know, what are some things we should think about in this area? Because it is, you know, it's not lively at all times like downtown. It's more event focused, unless you go to Starbucks every morning, which I know many people do.
Mhm.
I think their crosswalks are a lot better than others because of the amount of traffic that they create throughout the season. So that makes a huge difference for pedestrian traffic. And of course, as you walk that direction, you don't have the downtown core. So it's just a different atmosphere. One thing that I might mention that hasn't been mentioned, Paige had mentioned more garbage cans. In Palm Springs, they have recycle bins that actually crunch the cans right there, and they've got advertising on them. That would be a good thing, especially in the fair area, because there's a lot of recycling, but because right now we're mixing garbage and recycling downtown.
So being able to increase the number or types of receptacles, but also branding with that
Yes.
too. A couple comments. Tim, you had a comment about you know, pricing of parking. You know, and this is actually an interesting picture where we have lots of big parking lots. Tim, are you talking about parking just on downtown streets or streets in this area, or is there something else you wanted to get at with that?
Well, Donald Shoup's, I mean, for those who don't know, Donald Shoup, you know, he's the most famous parking guru in the entire world. He's about, God, 80, 85 years old now, still a professor at UCLA. And the way he did a total 180 with Pasadena is just a story that everyone needs to see and know about. It's incredible. So you know, people were like, he first studied Aspen, Colorado for some reason. You know, people are like, God, it's so hard to, I think it's because it's really narrow, like shoehorned in there. And it's so expensive. You can't have all these empty parking lots there. It's just the real estate's way too expensive. So it's like street parking, you know, pretty much only is the only option. And they were like, how do we solve this parking crisis? So they hired him, and he's like, you need to triple or something the price of street parking. And the business owners like, that'll destroy business. Are you kidding? He's like, just do it. And they did it. Then they found that it was incredible for business, because now people can no longer park for 6 hours and just leave their car and stuff like that. So you have people coming in and out and like, oh yeah, and supporting the businesses, and it just, you want people moving in and out, and you always want there to be a couple of empty parking spaces on every block where there's street parking. It should never be 100% full. So it has to be priced correctly, that kind of thing.
So better parking management downtown, and from what I'm hearing is, you know, through this area. Yeah. So you know, for pricing or times, or you know, whatever the management is to improve turnover, so that we have, is that fair?
Yeah, improve turnover, definitely. And someone mentioned the garbage, creative garbage thing. Spokane has the garbage goat. If you haven't heard of the garbage goat in Riverfront Park in Spokane, it is amazing. There is no garbage at all in Riverfront Park, and that is a huge park. My favorite city park, Riverfront Park, in the entire country. And there is not a speck of garbage, because every single kid wants to feed the garbage to the goat.
It is, Spokane has some amazing riverfront elements, particularly with some of the pieces they've done from an art standpoint. They have a skating rink. I mean, not a skating rink, but you know, actual track. Very cool stuff. I want to talk, and Kathy, there's two questions. It's actually related to the comment you had about safer pedestrian crossings in this area compared to others. I want to talk about that, but I also want to ask the group. So we're at the southern part of the project area. We started at the northern part of the project area in downtown. What is the experience of walking? So say you park at, you know, by the Meeker Mansion, for example, or, you know, somewhere around there. What's your experience walking down to the Washington State Fair, what are some of the challenges or some of the specific areas you would really think like, and this is kind of hard. This is a tough space, or conversely, this is really comfortable. I really like this area. So are there, if you're making that that move, what's that experience coming up and down the corridor?
Figure it out.
Well, I probably walk that more than anybody does. And it's a simple walk. During fair time, of course, there's delays waiting for the lights, but that's where people are stacked to head to the fair. I don't know. Does anyone think it's not a simple walk?
Well, I guess, or maybe more explicitly, it's a straight walk for sure.
Mm-hmm. There's no trees. There's no tree roots. There might be a few in front of Safeway now that I said that. It's certainly nicer since they've carried the baskets down further. And I think that is what people would say about the south part. It would be nice to include them in downtown so it doesn't look like it just ends. So both the plantings, the flower baskets and the Christmas decorations in the last few years have been brought down a couple more blocks.
So make this, if I'm hearing correctly, and David, I think to your point, this area gets boring. You need more storefronts or something. This is a much different environment, right, than downtown, which has that old Main Street feel. This, if you're driving north on Meridian, this is a much different experience than you have, or if you're walking or riding your bike, a much different experience than when you get into the core of downtown. So what I'm hearing, Kathy, is bringing some of those amenity south into this area to make it more consistent.
But you can't drive north on Meridian.
No, excuse me, true. If you're coming south, thank you. The couplet.
Sorry.
I forgot. So more consistency with the streetscape coming in this area downtown, make it feel more a part of the area. What about?
Well, I think to follow up on David's point, maybe that is economic development focused to, there could be more condos. Somebody else mentioned other condos. There could be a different type of development on the south part. We are the first mixed use building on South Meridian.
Yeah, and so there's space here too, right? So there's, that's definitely something we've heard is that, this is a totally different environment than your core area. Are there unique aspects to this area that we could build upon through the infrastructure? What about during the fair or during other events? Do you think people know there's a downtown Puyallup if they're at the fair or they're at an event? Do you think, if they're coming from outside, do they know that there's a great Main Street 6 blocks to the north if they didn't go through it?
It certainly gets crowded.
Yeah, well, they might not know if they come in on the freeway and go directly towards the fair. They might not understand how close our downtown is.
So signage or something along that to help assist with that. I know, I'll confess I'm from Portland, so don't hold it against me. But when I was driving in, I kept looking for downtown Puyallup. So I came off, I drove up, was like, okay, where's the historic sign, or where's the directional that showed me where downtown was? And so it was surprising to just kind of be there all of a sudden. And I'm wondering, from your experience, if that's something other people feel. It sounds like potentially, but also downtown gets busy during fair or other events. But do you think we need to tie these two areas together better?
Yes, we need to tie all areas better. When you come off of Pioneer, we need better wayfinder signs. We've talked about it for years, and what we ended up with was something pretty tiny, really just downtown. And they could be artistic. Again, you could bring that whole scenario in of artistic wayfinders. You've got the art commissions, arts downtown, all of those people who are working to do those things. And instead we got little red signs that say downtown, and you have to look for them. You have to be on the corner.
So make it a little bit more creative, make it more, you know,
Yes.
splashy so people can see it. That's great, thank you. So we have just a few more minutes. I wanted to make sure if there's anybody else who, and again, it doesn't have to be in this section. We can always go back to those previous maps. As you can see, we've been building a story around each of these sections we've been looking at. What are we missing? What absolutely needs to be on the map before we close out the meeting here in about 10 minutes or so? Or maps. We can go, like I said, we can go back. And Adam or Tyler or others, if you want to again provide input, feel free. You're also welcome just to listen and watch, but you know, don't be shy. Use the chat if you want, or feel free to raise your hand or just jump in.
I think it would be real important to get some of the building owners, not just the businesses, but the building owners involved. Because without them, we tend to stay a status quo.
Yeah, so engage the, you know, the landowners, the business owners, the building owners as a part of this. Thank you. All right, Tim, I'm going to steal that one. Dogs are curious, kids are curious, but adults maybe not so much. So where does
Maybe not so much. You are welcome to steal that.
I might have to do that. So yeah, I think that's really interesting. Like thinking about walking your dog or your cat. I know some people walk cats too. Walking your dog, kind of where the dog goes by its nose. You know, it's following a trail in some fashion. And so are there a series of breadcrumbs that we would want to leave throughout this area to make it more explorable? You know, I think, you know, art has been a key piece of this, knowing where your local businesses are. But what are those, you know, are those key elements that we could think about from an exploration standpoint that or a discovery standpoint, that we don't have the sense of smell as a dog, but we do have the visual cues that move us forward. And so I think that's a lot of what we've been talking about here. Is there's just basic things like sidewalk improvements and others, but there's also that, what brand or identity does this area have compared to downtown Puyallup, or is it you know, consistent across? But I think I'm going to steal that, Tim. I like your analogy.
I think the art downtown will bring people in, plus it gives them a trail to follow. If they are looking for that next piece, to explore that and see what that's all about, and we can expand that out as long as it's safe to do so.
Great, thank you, Paige.
And what about historical markers? There for a while we had more, the old opera house was on the side of a building, you know, showing where it was. Some people don't even know we had an old opera house. Mm-hmm. You know, historical markers in a better fashion that could be artful or could just be markers would be good to incorporate.
And you have great old buildings downtown. Mm-hmm. But you know, on Stewart, that's just a great row of buildings. You know, they're maintained and painted. They have other places south. Great opportunities for that. All right, so we have just a few more minutes. Are there other questions or comments, thoughts that we wanted to get on these maps before we move on to next steps?
Well, now you had in your proposal that's on the website that we read, you talked about bringing in art and doing different things with art, but we didn't talk about that really in your original one today. What are you thinking about that?
Art as a project, or art as a because right now what we've been doing is we've looked at baseline information, all the existing information out there. Okay. And so we've been talking to like the Main Street Association and resident groups, bike ped, advocacy groups and others, to really just get a lay of the land. And a lot of what we're doing today is to explore that a little bit more. So Paige, I think we've heard a lot about art in this, and you know, when we get into next steps, which Nathan can cover in just a moment, we're going to be getting to a series of projects or programs that we'll want to start to consider. And so art as a project or a program could be something like that. And so we will be coming back in June to actually talk about what some of those projects or programs might be. And so what we need to do now, though, is we're just trying to get an understanding of what you think is most important and where we should start to focus. Does that make sense?
I think so.
Thank you.
Yeah, another way, that kind of opportunity to include more art in the future is we've heard the need for directional signage and wayfinding is important for downtown, and all of a sudden those kind of sign stands or kiosks and even kind of the family of those signs could be opportunities to engage with and include artists, whether it be something that's done at a rollout or done kind of seasonally or annually or something. So I think it's kind of like Alex mentioned, kind of figure out the opportunities in the projects, and then are there ways, if expanding art is important and a priority, how can we kind of integrate that into those opportunities?
All right, so with that, Nathan, do you want to talk about next steps? Then we'll close it out with Scott and the survey and any other comments or questions.
May I just add something really quickly about art?
Sure.
Because I appreciate what was said, and I appreciate the fact that Arts Downtown is now a stakeholder, but we don't really know what that means. So as a stakeholder, and that you can get back to us on that, but as a stakeholder, and when we talk about art projects, is that with Arts Downtown? Are you including them? Are you eliminating them? Are you partnering with them? Are you, what's the intent?
I think as an art stakeholder, you guys bring a different perspective and a different voice. And so I think including you in ongoing conversations as the project team working with city staff identifies opportunities for investment in downtown infrastructure, whether that's something that's, kind of traffic or street focused, or, sidewalk environment and kind of aesthetic. There are opportunities. I think you guys would bring a different and unique perspective. And so it's important that we include you guys in those conversations to help kind of frame, and like the wayfinding example, maybe there's something with signage that there's something that the Art Council or Commission is interested in doing. Does that help a little bit answer your question?
It does, but I'm going to say it one more time. Arts Downtown is a nonprofit. Art Commission is the city. Two different groups.
And I apologize. I think the intent is both of those groups.
I understand. A lot of people don't realize, they think Arts Downtown is the city. They think the city provides the art, and that isn't accurate.
So Nathan, let's talk about next steps, and obviously there's going to be a lot more conversation around this. This is our first public discussion about this, and we're excited to have this conversation, but there's a lot more to come. And so Nathan, do you want to just give a quick summary of kind of where we're going over the next few months, and then we'll close this out.
So the online survey that we've talked about, that's open for about 3 weeks. We're going to be closing that out, I guess, kind of middle of February-ish. And that will sort of close out this sort of initial phase of data gathering and our initial outreach. While that's happening, we are starting to work with city staff and kind of the technical advisory committee to identify kind of criteria to help prioritize kind of proposed improvements or projects. We're not developing new goals, so we're really relying on existing goals and priorities that have been established through the downtown neighborhood plan, which is part of the city's comprehensive plan. And so we'll be developing that sort of evaluation process. And when we come back out to the public, both kind of our stakeholder focus groups and the general public, we'll be presenting the series of projects and opportunities, as well as some initial thoughts on how that would be prioritized. I'm not saying, this project is first, but, what are the higher priorities and what are the lower priorities? So we're expecting that we'll have that information around June, would be our kind of next check-in with sort of the broader community as an open house.
Hopefully in person, which would be great. We actually put stuff on a map for real. So let me just, Sue posted 2 links in the chat that I wanted to make sure everybody saw. There is a link to this survey, which I'll share in just a second, just to show you kind of what that is. But then also there's been a number of existing conditions documents that the team has put together. If you're interested in that, that link goes straight to our Meridian Streetscape project. And so that's a great place for information, just to stay up to date on what the project is and, you know, current information. But also if you have questions or comments, there's also contacts there as well too. So it's a great place just to stop in and, you know, if you have questions or comments, be able to get those answered or find the person to be able to do that. But let me go ahead and share the survey real quick. So as I said, a lot of the questions that we talked about today started to get into some of these questions. This survey goes into much more depth. And so I really encourage you to take it because it does ask a lot of the questions that we talked about today, but allows you to spend as little or as much time on it. If you just go through the survey, it's probably a 5 to 7 minute survey. If you really wanted to dig into it, you could spend as much time as you wanted providing information. But it's super fun. It's map based. And so this is just the first screen. And so what this allows you to do is to take, place pins on a map and actually answer different questions. So as you get into the survey, you'll actually be able to place pins and then talk about specific intersections or links. We're going to ask you about how you get around downtown. What are your routes? What are some of the things you experience? Similar to the questions we have today. So I encourage you to take it because it allows us to get very much into depth. And this is one that anybody can take. And so we're hoping to get a really good response for it. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing. I just wanted to thank you for the conversation today. I think this was really helpful. Again, if you want to tune in and do it again at 6 o'clock, you're more than welcome to. We'll be asking about the same questions as we step through, and we'll be building on the mural that we started over this lunch hour. This is super helpful for us to be able to help start to think about what future projects or programs might be for downtown. So this conversation, I think, was really deep and really will help us start to formulate the next steps that we want to come back to you in June, as Nathan mentioned. With that, any closing thoughts from attendees? And then after that, Scott, I'll have you close us out.
I'm just curious how many people attended that were just citizens, just us, and not staff or presenters.
I can tell you that. We had, I believe, 18 total. So we had about 10 community members. And then I think we have more signed up for the evening session today. And partly, Kathy, why we did 2 different sessions is people have different schedules. And so we want to make sure we can capture as many people as possible.
Thank you.
Sure. Any other questions or comments? All right, then. With that, Scott, do you want to close us out?
Yes, I would. Thank you, everybody, for taking your lunch hour to spend time with us and be informed about the project, and then also provide feedback. For those of you that missed the presentation, it will be posted to the city website eventually. So if you didn't get a chance to see it, you can see it there, or as Alex had indicated, you can tune in again at 6 p.m. this evening and see it again. And I want to thank MIG for all the hard work that they've done, putting all the documentation all the baseline documentation that we have posted to the website. And I'd also like to give a shout out to Eric Johnson, our PIO, who's been very, very helpful in getting this all collaborated and put together. So just great job, team. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a team effort, and we are recording these as well, so they will be posted. So if you want to go back and hear the conversation, that will be available in probably the next few days once we get everything shut down and sent over to the city to update for the website. So this has been super helpful. Thank you so much for the time. A lot more to come. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to talk more about this and look forward to seeing you in the warmer summer months of June, hopefully in person when we're all back and we can be actually in the same room together talking about great projects. So with that, thank you, and we'll talk soon.